The sun was setting over a forgotten street in New York, the kind of street no one walked anymore. Silent, abandoned, swallowed by time. A cold wind rushed through broken fences, carrying whispers of a past long gone. And in the middle of that silence, a man appeared, John Wick. His steps were slow, heavy, not from exhaustion, but from the weight of memories. The world knew him as a legend, a man impossible to kill, the assassin who once made the underworld tremble with just the mention of his name. But today, none of that mattered, because today he wasn't John Wick. He was just Johnny, the boy who once lived here. His eyes locked onto a small, worn-down house at the end of the street. Paint chipped off the walls, roof sagging, windows cracked and lifeless. The garden where he once played was now overrun with weeds, swallowing every trace of laughter that had once filled this place. John stopped at the rusty gate. For a moment he didn't move. He simply stood there, staring at the house that had built him, broken him, and yet, somehow, still called him back. The gate creaked loudly as he pushed it open, the sound cutting through the silence like a scream. Each step toward the house was like walking deeper into his own past. He could almost see a younger version of himself running barefoot through the yard, his mother calling him in for dinner, his father fixing the old fence. For the world, John Wick was a ghost. But here, he was a child again, his hand reached out, brushing against the old wooden door. The surface was rough, splintered, scarred with time, just like him. For a long moment he hesitated, his chest rising and falling with a storm of emotions no one had ever seen in him before. He had faced bullets. He had faced betrayal. He had even faced death itself. But nothing had prepared him for the moment of facing his past. Finally, with a slow breath, John Wick pushed the door open. The house answered with a groan, as if it too remembered him. And as the darkness inside swallowed him whole, one truth became clear. What he feared most wasn't the enemies waiting outside. It was the memories waiting within. The door closed behind him with a heavy thud, sealing John Wick inside the house of his past. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of dust and time. Cobwebs clung to the corners, and broken shards of glass lay scattered across the floor. Every shadow stretched long and dark, as though the walls themselves carried secrets too old to be forgotten. John stood still for a moment, letting his eyes adjust to the dim light seeping through the cracked windows. His hand brushed across the wall, feeling the rough texture of peeling paint. It was cold to the touch, but beneath it he felt something warmer, familiar, a memory. He took his first step forward. The floor groaned beneath his weight, echoing through the silence. Each sound seemed louder than it should have been. The echo of wood breaking, the faint whistle of wind sneaking through gaps in the walls. To any other man, it was a ruin. But to John, it was a cathedral of memory. As he walked deeper into the living room, his eyes fell on a table in the corner. Dust layered it like snow, but sitting on top was a broken photo frame. He wiped the glass with his hand, revealing an old photograph beneath. His mother, smiling, his father, tall and strong. And there between them, a young boy no older than 8. Johnny, him. For the first time in years, John Wick felt something inside him crack. The assassin the world feared. Felt his throat tighten. He traced the outline of his parents with his fingers, as if he could hold on to them one more time. A faint sound broke his silence. Tap. Upstairs. John's head snapped up instantly. Years of instinct returned like a reflex. His hand twitched toward where a gun would have been. But tonight he carried none. He came here unarmed, vulnerable, because this wasn't a battlefield. At least, it wasn't supposed to be. His steps grew cautious as he moved toward the staircase. The wooden boards cried beneath his boots. Dust rose with each step, curling in the air like smoke. And yet the sound repeated. Tap, tap, tap. He paused at the foot of the stairs, his eyes fixed on the dark corridor above. His mind whispered one thing. Is someone here or worse? Is it just the house reminding him of what he lost? John inhaled deeply, steadying himself. He had walked into ambushes. He had entered rooms filled with killers. But never had he felt a tension like this. the tension of facing his own past. His hand rested on the banister, rough and splintered. He closed his eyes for a second, remembering his mother's voice, calling him down for dinner, the smell of food once filling this home. For a brief heartbeat, he was Johnny again. Then the sound came once more, louder, closer. Something or someone was waiting upstairs. The staircase creaked under his boots as John Wick climbed one step at a time. Each movement was slow, deliberate, not out of fear, but because the house itself demanded respect. Dust floated in the dim light, seeping through broken curtains, turning the air into a fog of memories. The sound that had drawn him upstairs was gone now. Silence returned, heavier than before, and yet John's instinct screamed that he wasn't alone. Every shadow seemed alive, every corner watching. At the top of the stairs, a narrow hallway stretched before him. Faded wallpaper peeled off the walls, exposing wooden beams beneath. He glanced left, then right. Doors stood closed, like secrets waiting to be discovered. His steps carried him to the door at the very end. His old room. The handle was cold when he touched it, as if the house itself resisted his return. With a deep breath, he pushed it open. The hinges groaned loudly, echoing through the silent house. Inside, time had frozen. The room was small, smaller than he remembered. The walls, once painted a soft blue, were now cracked and faded. A thin layer of dust coated everything, yet beneath it lay fragments of a life once innocent. John's eyes fell to the bed. The blanket still lay there, torn and moth-eaten, but recognizable. He reached down, his fingers brushing over the fabric. For a moment, he could almost feel the warmth of his childhood nights, the comfort of a home that had once felt safe. Then, his foot nudged something beneath the bed. He crouched down, pulling out a small toy car. Its wheels rusted, paint chipped, but unmistakably his. A memory surged, a young Johnny racing it across the floor, laughter filling the air. For an instant, the ghost of that sound echoed in his ears, pulling at something deep within him. But it wasn't just the car. John's gaze shifted to the old wooden desk in the corner. One of its drawers was slightly open. Carefully, he slid it wider. Inside lay a box, rusted and weathered, its lock broken long ago. He lifted the lid. Inside were relics of a forgotten childhood, a folded letter, yellow with age, and a photograph. The letter trembled in his hands as he unfolded it. The handwriting was delicate, unmistakable. His mother's, "My dearest Johnny, if life ever becomes too heavy, if the world ever breaks you, come home. This house will always wait for you. And so will I in the memories we built here." The words blurred as his eyes filled. The assassin, feared across continents, stood trembling in the ruins of his boyhood, undone by the love of a mother long gone. But then his eyes shifted to the photograph. It showed him, as a child, standing between his parents, their smiles bright, their arms wrapped around him. But there was someone else in the picture, a tall man, a stranger standing beside his family. A face John did not recognize, his brow furrowed, his breath caught. Who was he? Why was this man standing with them? As if he belonged? The questions tore through John's mind like bullets. This house wasn't just a place of memory. It was holding secrets, secrets he had never been told. And as John stared at the stranger's face, one thought whispered in his mind, chilling him to the bone. What else have I forgotten? The house was quiet again, too quiet. John Wick sat on the edge of his childhood bed, the letter still trembling in his hands. His mother's words echoed in his mind. "Come home, Johnny. This house will always wait for you." But now the house felt different. The discovery of that photograph had unsettled him. Who was the stranger standing with his family? Why had he never been told? He slid the photo back into the box, but his instincts refused to calm. That strange sound he had heard earlier, it hadn't been the house settling. Someone else had been here, watching. The clock on the wall ticked slowly. 11:58 p.m. The hands moved with an eerie rhythm, marking time in a place that seemed trapped between past and present. Then, knock, knock. The sound was sharp, deliberate, cutting through the silence like a blade. John froze. The knock had come from downstairs, the front door. He rose silently, every movement controlled, every muscle tense. The John Wick the world feared was back. His childhood memories might have softened him for a moment, but danger had a way of bringing his instincts alive again. The floor creaked beneath his boots as he moved toward the stairs. Another knock followed, slower this time. Knock, knock! But this wasn't the frantic pounding of an enemy trying to break in. No, this was calm, intentional, like someone announcing themselves, waiting to be let in. John descended the stairs, his hand brushing the banister he once slid down as a child. Each step pulled him deeper into a confrontation he couldn't predict. His eyes scanned the hallway, shadows stretching long under the faint moonlight, seeping through cracked windows. At the door, he paused, his breath steady, his ears sharp. Whoever it was, they hadn't moved. They were still there, waiting. He reached for the knob, then stopped. Instead, he leaned close, listening. The night outside was alive with distant crickets and the whisper of wind through the trees. But just beyond the door, silence. Heavy silence. Finally, in a voice low and steady, he asked, "Who's there?" No response. The silence stretched thick and suffocating. Then slowly a voice came, "Johnny." John's blood ran cold. No one had called him that in decades. Not since his mother. Not since the days when he was just a boy, before the world turned him into a weapon. He gripped the doorknob tighter. "Who are you?" The voice came again, softer, almost trembling. "Open the door, and you'll know." For a moment, time itself seemed to hold its breath. John's hand hovered over the lock. His instincts screamed not to trust, not to fall into a trap. Yet something in the voice, something fragile, almost broken, made him hesitate. Finally, with a sharp twist, he unlocked the door and pulled it open. The night air rushed in. Moonlight spilled across the porch, and there, standing in the shadows, was a figure, tall, wrapped in a dark coat, their face half hidden beneath the brim of a hat. The stranger stepped forward, just enough for the light to reveal worn features, eyes filled with a strange familiarity. John's chest tightened. He didn't know the man, yet he did. The voice spoke again, closer now, carrying the weight of years. "It's been a long time, Johnny." Too long. John's jaw clenched. His hand twitched, instinctively ready for violence. "You knew my family." The man's eyes softened, pain flickering across his face. "I was more than that," he whispered. "I was part of it, the photograph, the stranger standing beside his parents." John's mind raced. This wasn't coincidence. This was connected. Before he could speak, the man added quietly, "There are things you were never told. Things about your parents, about who you really are." The silence that followed was unbearable. The world-famous assassin, the man who had faced death countless times without flinching, now felt the ground shift beneath him. This was no ordinary knock. This was the sound of truth breaking through the past. And John Wick knew his life was about to change forever. The night was still. The moonlight stretched across the broken porch as John Wick stood frozen, facing the man who had knocked on his door. His voice lingered in the air. "There are things you were never told." John's eyes narrowed. Every instinct screamed caution, yet something deeper held him back. The photograph in the box, his mother's letter, the stranger's haunting familiarity, it was all connected. He stepped aside, his voice sharp. "Instantly, now!" The man obeyed without hesitation, stepping into the dim light of the hallway. His coat brushed against the worn wooden walls, his footsteps quiet but steady. Once inside, John shut the door, locking it firmly. For a moment, the two men stood in silence, the assassin and the stranger. Shadows from the flickering lamp danced across their faces. Finally, John broke the silence. "Talk!" The stranger removed his hat. His hair was streaked with gray, his face lined with years of hardship. But his eyes were the same as the ones in the photograph. "My name is Marcus Vale," the man said slowly, his tone heavy with memories. "I knew your parents. Better than anyone." John's jaw tightened. "That doesn't explain why you were in that photo. Why my mother never mentioned you." Marcus exhaled, the weight of secrets pressing down on him. "Because she couldn't. Because telling you the truth would have put you in more danger than you can imagine." John's silence was sharp, demanding answers. Marcus looked around the house, as if the walls themselves were listening. Then he lowered his voice. Your father wasn't just a mechanic. Your mother wasn't just a homemaker. They were part of something bigger, a life hidden from you. John's eyes darkened. Bigger how? Marcus paused, then delivered the words that cut like knives. They were part of the high table. The room felt colder. The words echoed, impossible yet undeniable. John's mind reeled. His entire life, he had believed his path into violence was his own making, a choice born of loss and circumstance. But now, the foundation cracked beneath him. You're lying, John growled. Marcus shook his head. I wish I was. Your father, he was a strategist, one of the finest minds the table ever had. And your mother, she was more feared than you are now. The stories they tell of you, Johnny, once they told the same of her. John's breath hitched. Memories of his mother's gentle smile flashed before him, now painted with shadows of a past he never knew. Why? Why would they keep this from me? Marcus's eyes softened. Because they wanted to protect you. They wanted you to live free of the blood, free of the chains that bound them. They thought if you never knew, you could escape it. But fate has a cruel way of finding us. Silence wrapped around them. John turned away, his fists clenching. He felt betrayed, yet he couldn't ignore the clarity in Marcus's voice. Marcus stepped closer. Your father and I, we weren't just allies. We were brothers in arms. And when they died, it wasn't an accident. It was no illness, no tragedy. They were taken from you. John spun, his eyes blazing. What do you mean? Marcus's expression hardened. Your parents were executed, betrayed by the very people they served. And you, Johnny, you were meant to be next. That's why they hid you. That's why I disappeared. The words struck John like bullets. His chest tightened, his mind flooded with rage and sorrow. All these years, every scar, every fight, every step into the underworld. And he had never known the true reason behind his destiny. They kept me in the dark. John whispered, his voice trembling between fury and grief. Marcus nodded. Because they loved you. More than anything, but now the truth has found you. And so will the ones who ended them. A silence heavier than gunfire fell between them. John Wick, the man who had faced armies, who had buried his grief in violence, now stood not as an assassin, but as a son stripped of illusions. His heart, once a weapon, now carried the unbearable weight of betrayal. He turned his gaze toward the window, where the night stretched endlessly. His reflection in the glass stared back, not as Baba Yaga, but as Johnny, the boy who once laughed, once dreamed, once had a family. And in that reflection, he saw something he hadn't in years, a war not for survival, but for truth. The knock at midnight had not brought an enemy. It had brought the past, and with it, a fire John Wick could no longer ignore. The house had grown colder. The whispers of the past clung to its broken walls, like ghosts refusing to leave. John Wick stood by the window, staring into the endless night. Behind him, Marcus Vale's words still echoed. Your parents were executed, betrayed by the high table, and you were meant to be next. The truth burned inside him, heavier than any wound he had ever carried. He wasn't just a weapon forged by circumstance. He was born into a war. His entire life, every step, every loss, it was all tied to a legacy he never chose. His hand clenched against the glass, the faint reflection of his own eyes staring back at him. For the first time in years, the assassin looked human again, broken, searching, furious. Behind him, Marcus spoke softly. I kept this from you for too long. But I couldn't let you live in lies anymore. You deserve to know. John didn't turn. His voice was low, trembling with rage. You let me believe I was alone. You let me bury them as if they were ordinary. Marcus lowered his head. Because the truth would have destroyed you before you were ready. John turned sharply now, his gaze piercing. And you think I'm ready now? Marcus's silence said everything. The clock struck midnight. Its chime echoed through the house like a countdown. Outside, the wind howled, carrying with it the faintest sound of distant engines. John's instincts sharpened. He wasn't just hearing the wind. Someone was out there, watching. waiting. He reached for his pistol, checking it with the calm precision of a man who had done it 1,000 times. But this time, the weight of the gun felt different. This wasn't about survival anymore. This was about blood. About truth. Marcus stepped forward, his voice urgent. "They'll come for you, Johnny. Now that you know, they won't let you live. The high table doesn't forgive, and it doesn't forget." John holstered the weapon and stared at Marcus. "Then let them come." His tone was steel, cold, unyielding, but Marcus shook his head. "This isn't just another fight. This is the war your parents died in. If you step into it, there's no going back." John's eyes darkened. There's nothing left to go back to. For a moment, the silence between them was unbearable. Marcus could see it in John's eyes, the fire of vengeance, but also the pain of a son betrayed by fate. Finally, Marcus placed a hand on John's shoulder. "Then let me stand with you. I couldn't save your parents, but maybe I can help you finish what they started." John looked at him, the weight of years pressing down. Trust didn't come easy, not anymore. But tonight, in this house, the walls of his past had already crumbled. What was left was raw, real. He gave a single nod. Suddenly, headlights flared outside. The faint hum of engines grew louder. Shadows moved along the tree line. The house, once a graveyard of memories, was now a battlefield waiting to ignite. Marcus's voice was sharp. "They're here." John Wick turned from the window, his face no longer broken by grief. It was the face the world feared, Baba Yaga reborn. But this time, the fire in his eyes burned not for survival, not for contracts or vendettas, but for truth. He walked to the center of the room, where his mother's letter still lay open on the desk. For a brief moment he touched the paper, his fingers brushing over her words. "This house will always wait for you," he whispered under his breath, almost to her spirit. "I'm home, Mom." Then, with a calmness that felt like destiny, he chambered around. The night outside erupted. Footsteps, voices, the first crack of gunfire. Marcus drew his weapon, standing at John's side. "Together, then?" John glanced at him, a faint shadow of something almost human passing across his face. "Together!" The front windows shattered as bullets tore into the house. Wood splintered, glass rained down, and the quiet sanctuary of his childhood became an arena of violence. But John Wick didn't flinch. He moved with lethal grace, every step echoing the ghosts of his parents, every shot carrying the weight of their memory. This wasn't just a fight. It was an inheritance. And as the first body fell, John knew one truth more powerful than any bullet. He wasn't just finishing his story. He was continuing theirs.